Hello, my name's Julie Cairnes and I'm a life mastery and conscious creation coach. I'm here today to introduce you to our Inner Peace Masterclass, and today we have the wonderful Adam Oakley with us. Adam is
Hello.
Hey, and Adam's an author of a number of books, and he is going to talk to us today about some of the journey he took to reach the place that he's in, that brought him to the wisdom that comes through in the books that he's written. So Adam, welcome to the Inner Peace Masterclass.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'd just like to start with talking to you about how you came. Well, you've written a number of books. Can you tell me how many books you've written?
I think it's 5 at the moment.
And you've written a number of books, and a number of them are about inner peace, and some of them are different. Some of them are children's books, and there are other subjects, but you did write extensively on inner peace. And I'm just wondering if you can just open it up to us and tell us a little about your own personal journey to how you've reached the place that you're now in.
Yeah. So my background was very academic. I don't know, my life, I suppose, was a lot about just doing very well in school and doing well in exams and going to university. And that all went well from an outside perspective. But when I left university, I realized that even though I'd learned a lot of things and been taught a lot of things, I never really had been taught how to manage my own mind or manage my own thinking or deal with emotions, like how to actually deal with stuff if I was scared of something or if I was angry at something. We can get taught so much stuff, but not what to do when you feel upset or just how to resolve past traumas or anything like that. So I came out of university with a lot of kind of pent up anger and frustration and a mind that would just not stop, like unbearably just frantic and relentless. So that sort of drove me, actually not even drove me, but accidentally I just came across some spiritual teachings, like a book by Eckhart Tolle, which most people have read, called In New Earth. And when I started reading that and came across the idea that we are not really our thoughts, or that our thoughts are just kind of expressions of ourselves, but we're always here to witness our own thoughts, and realizing that the voices that talk in our head that we think is our own voice is something that we are aware of and something that comes and goes. And as thoughts arise, we're here, and when thoughts disappear, we're still here. So I was pointed towards the deeper aspect of ourselves that's before thought and that's beyond thought and emotions. And I gradually was exposed to how to deal with my own emotions better, especially negativity and negativity of others. So after noticing it, then no longer resisting it, no longer being on the habit of always fighting against what I didn't like about myself or what I didn't like about my experience, and realizing that without resistance, these things have far more space to open up and be seen and be released and even be loved, and then they kind of dissolve from there. And then after I went through a little journey of kind of cleansing and releasing a lot of things and losing who I thought I was, like my own mind-made identity, then I just started writing out kind of my own things that were at first ways to digest what I'd been taken in or insights that I'd had. And then eventually I put them on a website called innerpeacenow.com, like as a blog, and things just started to grow from there really. And then they unexpectedly turned into books. I started writing books, started speaking to people online and doing one-to-one sessions online to help them go through whatever they were dealing with and sort of they needed to let go of. And it's all gone from there really.
It's like you've become a default counsellor. What do they call it?
Almost accidental.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. There is an actual course in Australia called the Accidental Counsellor.
Oh, okay, yeah.
For people who just end up doing it, you know, they just end up doing it in certain workplaces, and I just feel like, but that you've been doing that. And something I wanted to ask you about was, I noticed I feel that you have a very strong mind from, you know, someone who's actually come to a strong place in your mind, which is kind of crucial in this world. And I feel a very strong need for authenticity from you. Like you speak of, I don't know, I won't use the word intolerance, but you don't like fakeness in the world. That's the word that comes up. I'm just wondering what that means for you, authenticity and the fakeness of the world.
I don't know. I can't even think. Maybe that comes from, I don't know where that comes from. Maybe some older articles or something. Well, I have noticed, I suppose, that a lot of our interactions are often not really genuine, and I would notice it a lot in myself that a lot of the time in social situations I wouldn't be completely authentic. Like as soon as I'd meet someone new or I'd be in unusual situations, there'd be like a kind of a mask that comes up. Like I would be less comfortable and I would act differently to when I was alone or with people that I'd known for a long time. So I suppose the discomfort of that in myself, I would notice, and I would see it in other people, and I suppose I'd notice our kind of conditioning that we always have to try and fill silence. That silence, especially among new people, is always encountered as awkward, and that's what can be so refreshing about interacting with children, is that they haven't really learnt that yet. So there's no such thing as an awkward silence, and there's no such thing as trying to make conversation. It's always the adult that's trying to make conversation with the kid, and that can be good as a way to stimulate them and develop their skills. But there's something inside us that often squirms and is just not at ease with not constantly interacting with each other mentally. And I feel like when we don't have so much of an urge to feel silence, then we sometimes can communicate on a far deeper level without even talking, and it's a strange thing that we're not often exposed to. But you can get a sense of people without necessarily even needing to talk about the story of their life, basically, or what's happening. And then from there, speech and conversation becomes just far more genuine, and it springs up, and it can be enjoyed, and it's good, rather than coming from like a background place of, we need to make some noise here at least, or we need to act like we're getting on. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, no, I find that interesting, because it is a gift when you can find people you can have that comfortable silence with. I know there's somebody in my family who I know we just can really just spend time together and not really say much, and it actually is energizing, whereas if there's someone who you talk to a lot, it can be almost a little bit draining if there's constant conversation, particularly if you're a bit of an sensitive person. It can really kind of and there's not, if one person is kind of very, very articulate and talks a lot, it can actually take energy from the other person, in a sense, I think, too.
Yeah, I think it's a powerful thing to not want anything from someone. So if someone drains another person, it's usually because they want something. They want stimulation, or they want energy, or they want they just want something. They want interaction.
Want to be heard.
And it's much easier. Sorry.
Want to be heard in some way.
Yeah. And it's much easier to be drained if you still want something from someone else. So if you want their approval, or if you want them to not feel uncomfortable, if you want something from someone in some way, then you'll always kind of feel like you have to compensate for something, or give energy to ultimately get what you want. And there's freedom in first realizing what you want from someone, and then letting that go and noticing that everything can still flow and you can still talk, but it's not so draining and forced if you're not wanting to get something from someone.
Yeah. What are were there kind of strong themes coming through from people who, because you've written that book about people who responded to you on your website? I'm just wondering, were there particular themes or particular things that people asked you consistently that prompted you to write that book? Was it kind of things that kept coming up, or was it really diverse things that people were speaking to you about?
Yeah, so that free book that people can get, the questions, like common questions and answers about this whole topic. I suppose a common question is how to deal with negativity in other people. How can I deal with this person who I live with or who's in my family that's always criticizing or is always negative towards me?
Yeah.
That's quite a common one. And the response to that is well, it can be different things, but one thing is to not take them so seriously. So if we always take people seriously, then it's like everything they say is very meaningful, and we have to feel like we have to fix them and fix their opinions and what they think. And if we treat people a little more lightly, it's not that we're disrespecting them, but we're just not taking everything they say as if it's true. And that's much easier, actually, if we don't take our own thoughts so seriously. So if we notice that every thought that we have is fleeting, every thought that we have, every opinion that we have, even though it might be valid and necessary to voice, it's still only one aspect of looking at things. So our thoughts about the world, our thoughts about our lives and what's happening isn't the absolute truth, because it's just one person's version, it's just one mind's version. So if we aren't treating ourselves too seriously, our own thoughts and our own negativities, if we realize our own negativities can be allowed and accepted and not resisted and judged, then the mirror of other people is far easier to deal with.
Yeah. So with having written so much about inner peace, do you have a personal practice that you do to come to that place yourself? Is there something you specifically do, or is it a place you can take yourself without a particular practice?
Yeah, it feels much less like I need a practice now. In the past, things have been useful to I suppose the first thing is to just notice how much resistance there is inside of me to how I was feeling or how I am feeling. So if I feel in any way uncomfortable or negative or anxious or depressed or anything, to not instantly try to address or fix that experience, but just to notice how much I hate that or how much I dislike feeling like this and how much I'm resisting it inside, and noticing all the ideas I have about this feeling. So I think a lot of the time, whether it's someone in a spiritual circle or someone who has no experience of spirituality or self-help, our negative emotions are often judged negatively as well. So if you're anxious, that's bad. If you're depressed, that's bad. If you're sad, that's bad. If you're angry, that's bad. And that can be even heightened when people start to look into how to deal with their emotions. They can almost, sometimes we can get brainwashed into thinking, well, no, I should always be peaceful. I should always be happy. I should always be light. These things shouldn't affect me. And then when there's that background sense of everything should be like this, I should always feel like this, then the more dense feelings feel twice as bad because we're resisting them. So it's noticing the resistance, noticing that the resistance isn't helping. The resistance to how I feel is not releasing how I feel. It's not making me feel better. And when we notice the futility of something, like resisting ourselves, it's easier to let go of it, and it can be released by itself. And then changing the relationship with whatever is disturbing me, rather than treating it as an enemy or something that shouldn't be happening or something that's wrong with me. You can start to welcome it. And even if it's intense emotional pain, or I used to get like strong surges of heat in my body for no reason, almost like I felt angry and frustrated, but nothing was even happening. It was just this trapped energy. A lot of it's trapped energy.
Yeah.
Welcoming it, even then when it starts to get even stronger and you think that maybe you're doing something wrong because it's getting stronger, it's actually being released, it's coming up to the surface, and just no longer conflicting with yourself, noticing how there might be a conflict and releasing that, so you're not striving to feel a different way. And counterintuitively, when you're not striving to feel a different way, suddenly how you do feel is not so bad. It's not so all-encompassing. We're not focused in on the form or the content of our experience, being our emotions and thoughts, and we notice that there's a greater space around these things that isn't contributing to these things. There's a space of awareness that's free, and once we have more space, then everything has space. Things can be released more easily. And I also think a strange thing, which can be very useful, is just say thank you. So if there's something in us that we don't like, so just say we feel very worried about something, if we just, almost like a mantra, say thank you to it for no reason at first, just the energy of gratitude can transform things, and we can notice things about ourselves, noticing that these feelings are actually trying to help us in some way. So if we feel anxious, it's like a defense mechanism, and our minds have identified something as dangerous, and the anxiety is to try to keep us from danger. So it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just like a defense mechanism that maybe has gone a bit extreme. But just saying thank you to things that, even if they're extremely uncomfortable, can transform first our relationship with them, and then it can almost bathe these things in a nicer energy rather than a resistive energy that keeps them strong.
Because you may not necessarily change the other person in the situation, but at least you've come to a place of a kind of acceptance within yourself. It may very likely change the situation, and the dynamics do get very kind of entrenched, as you say, and it's cyclic and intense. And so it's very hard for people to step out of an entrenched dynamic. Very hard. And it's interesting what you describe is, to me, what happens to meditators people who meditate for a long time, they experience that sense of watching, either really powerful emotions arising and falling away, and they're practicing equanimity to, they don't always achieve it, of course, but, just watching and feeling it, because you get more and more sensitized and to what the emotion is that's arising within you. So I don't know if that you do that, but it's as though you've come to that place of understanding of, the transitory nature of emotions. Yeah, and I think it's also useful for us to notice in that more neutral state, when we don't have so many ideas about whether this thought is bad or good, or if this feeling is bad or good. It's easier to just notice what actually is helpful. So if we experience a lot of something like anxiety or anger or depression or whatever it is, on some level we often believe that these things are helping us, so they're useful in some way. So if I'm depressed, it means that I can maybe fix things, or if I'm angry, I have more energy to make things better, or if I'm anxious, I can avoid something going wrong. And if we're more neutral, as you mentioned, and notice that they're fleeting, we can also see that how much they're helping us, if they are helping us or not, and they're kind of exposed, and we can see really what they're doing for us. And when we see that they're not doing much for us, like no matter how anxious I feel, it doesn't seem to change how things go, then it's like, without even trying to let go of the anxiety, it's seen like, oh, well, maybe I just don't need it then. Maybe it's just not necessary. And then the energy that feeds these things starts to relax. Yeah, that is actually what peace looks like, isn't it? I really want to ask you about one of your books, because you've written so much about peace, and then you've written a book about gladiators. And what's it called?
Oh, yeah.
I found that really interesting, because when I was reading about it, I was seeing that you'd written about people who are trapped in cages, and that theme comes up a little in another book, but people trapped in cages as gladiators who are kind of forced to perform, a bit like, an arena situation. And that's really interesting, kind of dichotomy to the other things that you write, and I'm just interested. Because I haven't read that book, so I'm not sure what the content is, but I'm interested.
Yeah, well, it's so strange because I wrote that a few years ago, and when you were talking about it, like almost referencing the symbology of it, I'd never even thought of it like that, like the people in cages being forced to perform. So that's great that you mentioned that, because I never even thought of it like that in terms of representing social dynamics. But yeah, it's like a short novel, about people who are born into a form of slavery, where they're either fighters or they're workers. And the fighters, they're forced pretty much like gladiators to get into stadiums and fight, sometimes to the death. And they have owners that often make money from them. And it's a lot about kind of waking up to your reality, or waking up to what's around you, being born into something that you think is normal, where everyone's acting a certain way, and you think, oh, this is just how it is, and then realizing that it's not a normal thing, that it seems normal because you've been born into it. That you start to notice that this isn't actually this isn't how things should be. It's not a normal way to live. And the main character in the book starts to wake up and realize that he doesn't have to be owned by people. He doesn't have to be trapped and a prisoner, kept by other people. And he kind of realizes his own power, and the whole message of it is that all these fighters are far more powerful than their owners. Like, they're fighters, they know how to fight, and they can easily break free if they want to, but they're so conditioned to always just follow orders and be in chains and do what they're told. And the book is about them realizing their own power and breaking free of their chains, sort of literally and mentally. So that's basically what it's about.
It's interesting because I've been, I'm a writer myself, and I've been kind of debating with myself really about the term of warrior, and how the use of the word warrior has shifted, from the gladiator warrior to the peace warrior. So it's like we still hang on to that concept, and it's really interesting. It's as though it's like we have a bit of a deep love affair, the human race, with the warrior, the fighter, the person who wins. And I sometimes wonder if it's possible to even if that mindset will ever go away, or we'll still always kind of love that energy of someone who battles to survive. And I find that an interesting thing about humanity. Yeah,
I think we feel like we're battling with outside forces that are trying to make us maybe do things we don't want to do. So we always want to go for the gold. And I suppose there is part of us that always wants to triumph and overcome. I think overcoming is a big part of being human. Well, I suppose any animal has obstacles, and we always like to see people overcome things that felt like they were trying to hold them back.
It's interesting. I want to ask you just what for you peace is. What does that mean for you, inner peace? How would you experience that?
To sum it up quickly, I would probably say the absence of conflict with yourself. So a lot of people think inner peace is maybe a feeling that should always be there, or that it's an absence of any kind of what we call negativity. So it's an absence of anger or resistance or anxiety or depression or frustration. But if you limit yourself to defining it like that, then you'll always be chasing a state that seems elusive. But I feel like it's much easier and effective to think of it in terms of an absence of conflict. So if someone's angry, not conflicting with that anger means that they're aware of the anger. The anger doesn't blind them, but they can also utilize the energy of that anger that maybe in some situations is necessary, or it's just kind of transmuted into just more of a clean force that isn't blind and looking to hurt people unnecessarily. And there is a peace and a space in relieving yourself of the burden to conflict with yourself and fix yourself and try to get yourself to feel a certain way all the time. And in the absence of conflict, these old things or these useless things almost sort themselves out, or they lose their grip over us.
Yeah, because I believe that everyone does feel intense emotions, you know, even anyone who has been, who would be like called an ascended master, I still believe they experience grief when they lost someone, no matter their understanding of you know, the transitory nature of life. We're still at this level. We have different levels of experience, and you know, it is how we deal with the intensity of those emotions. Do we direct it at someone else, or like, how would you advise someone if they said to you, like, I'm feeling incredibly angry, or I'm feeling some powerful emotion? What do you say to people when they ask you about that?
So it can depend on the person, but usually I'd say I'd ask them how they felt about being angry, and just first see what the relationship is with the anger. So if I hate being angry, then anger is like this enemy, and it's just terrible, and I think it's someone else's fault, which makes it even worse. So it's looking at the relationship with the anger, and experimenting, like being very playful, and playing with the idea of, rather than hating being angry or disliking the anger, actually saying, okay, this is how I feel, okay, and gradually getting to a complete yes over the feeling, and almost being friends with it. And from there, where there's more space, we can look at how the anger helps you right now. Like, does it help maybe to fix this situation, or fix the person, or make the person into how you want them to be? Does it even help to do that? And we look into really how we feel like the anger is helping, because on some level we probably believe that it is helping. And when we even notice that it's trying to help us in some way, then the relationship completely changes. We have more compassion for it. It's not an enemy that we're trying to fix or get rid of. And we also notice that it's coming from inside of us. So even though it's been triggered by maybe something external, it's still an internal thing. No one's given you the anger to experience. It's an inner thing. It's come from inside of you. So you have more, not even control, but you're less of a victim of it when you realize it comes from inside of you. And then things maybe can go even further from there. But just to mention one thing that I think is very common with people, if they've been on a self-help journey or a spiritual journey, and you mentioned it, is the idea of like a perfect spiritual person and how a spiritual person should be, which I think pretty much everyone falls into, because they often come across someone who they think is like a master or a great teacher. And they might be a great master or a great teacher, and they think, well, when I see them on YouTube, they're like this, so I should be like that as well. Like, I should be that calm, I should be that peaceful, I should be like this.
Yeah, it's deceptive.
Yeah, it's extremely deceptive. And sometimes like spiritual masters can be, by nature, they can be meek, and they can be, or even shy and quiet. But there can be others. There's some other famous ones that were extremely loud and could be very aggressive as well. So yeah, the difference is the relationship with the emotions and the identification with thoughts and feelings. Noticing that when there's anger, it's not really me, it's an anger that comes and it goes.
Because it has a very strong chemical reaction on our body too, I guess. I mean, it really can be toxic to our system because of some of the chemicals associated. If we keep, you know, I mean, obviously some people we know are quite charged and enlivened by anger. You know, they kind of get a hit out of it, and they'll stay in that space a lot more than others. And others will be, you know, stay in that depressed state, and it's really hard for them because, you know, and some antidepressants are designed to actually kickstart people to go into a different headspace. You know, you bring a different chemical into their body, and I don't condone that. I'm just saying that's how they've designed people, because the chemicals become so entrenched in the body that it's sometimes very hard for people to not believe it's a life sentence, that they actually can shift. You know, you actually, with the power of your mind, shift out of a state of mind, and it's almost enlightening to people when you say, you actually don't have to be in that space. It's not something you have to maintain, but it is. I mean, it's very important to acknowledge that you are feeling that. You know, like that feeling is there for a reason. It's there from a wound that. You know, healing takes place in different ways, but part of it is release. It very much definitely is release. So it's, you know, it is a very profound question of how we release without actually harming ourselves or others, because people often do harm themselves or others during the release of a heavy emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to add to that a little bit, it's also, as you said, it can be about noticing how much we secretly like feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
So anger can make us feel far more alive than
Yeah.
normal, or feeling depressed can give us a kind of identity, even if it's a victim identity.
Yeah.
Or just the feeling of some kind of pain can be strangely addictive, especially if there's two people who kind of feed off of each other.
Yeah.
Like Eckhart Tolle called it the pain body, where the energy of pain wants to kind of keep renewing itself, and in a strange way it's almost addictive. Like we don't like it, but secretly we kind of like it. And noticing that on some level we kind of like feeling a certain way, maybe it makes us feel more safe, or whatever.
Very uncomfortable comfort zone.
Yeah. So that's always good to look into and notice.
Yeah. I'd really like to thank you for speaking with me today. And I just wonder if you could just speak a little about the free gift, which we already spoke about. I'll leave that to you just to explain to our viewers what you're offering to them today.
Yeah, so quite a large ebook with lots of questions that people have asked me in the past, either on video sessions like one-to-one sessions, or they've just written to me and asked questions about obstacles that they faced on this path, or how to deal with certain aspects of their mind or emotions. Basically trying to feel better, trying to feel lighter, trying to feel more peace, and asking questions about their situation as to how they can experience that more. And there's my response to those questions. And that's basically it, and it's all free.
Well, thank you so much. And they can also see the link to your website will be on as part of this presentation, and so they can see all the other books that you've written also, because you've got quite a range of things. And also I believe you've written poetry books, children's books, and you're an artist, so you are multi-skilled.
And then as well as that, there's loads of free stuff on there as well. Still, there's loads of blog articles, there's some free meditations, there's some videos.
Fantastic.
It's quite a lot on there that people can get good things out.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to thank you again, because I feel it's been a really real conversation about real emotions. So I want to thank you for speaking today on our Inner Peace Masterclass.
No, you're very welcome. I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Me also. Thank you.